2024 Penn State football season has come to an end, and it came to an end maybe not in the most gut-wrenching way possible, but pretty darn close. 27-24, Notre Dame beats Penn State. Drew Allar throws an interception with a little over 30 seconds left. It sets Notre Dame up close to field goal range, and Notre Dame ended up getting into field goal range and converting a game-winning 40-yard field goal, and as a result, Notre Dame is going to play either Ohio State or Texas for the national championship January 20th, and Penn State has a lot of time to think about how this might play out in Miami. Joe Smelter, Jarrod, as we've been doing all season, we covered this one in person, and it was a tough one. It's gut-wrenching for James Franklin, every Penn State fan, and perhaps more than anybody else, Drew Allar.
Yeah, absolutely, and you hate to see it for a kid that pours his heart and soul into the program like Drew Allar does, but ultimately his interception, where he probably should have just thrown it away or taken the sack, cost them the game. At least there at the end, it didn't necessarily cost them the game, because I think there were probably 8 to 10 plays that really were big factors there in the outcome of the contest. But that one helped set up Notre Dame for the game-winning field goal, and they hit it. And kudos to Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman and their program for getting to play in the national championship game. But Drew Allar was playing with fire throughout the game. He was not on his A game as a quarterback. He overthrew a lot of guys. The receivers were non-existent. They had 2 tackles,
Literally.
0 receptions, and he had 2 near interceptions as well. And ultimately, those were negated by penalties. But it just wasn't a crisp game from Allar. But everything else was a really good game for Penn State. It just came down to who was going to make the biggest, or who was going to make the first mistake at the end of the game, and it was it was Penn State.
One play that I don't know if too many people are thinking about that I think was as big as anything else, and I'm gonna preface this by saying that Abdul Carter is not responsible for this loss. He was a freak, playing on basically one arm. I think he had at least 2 sacks, had another sack that was negated by a penalty. Was getting held every play as usual. They couldn't block him. He was awesome. At the same time, end of the first half, Penn State's winning 10-0. Denied Dennis Sutton, strips Riley Leonard. Carter is so close to coming up with a fumble, but Notre Dame ends up keeping possession, getting a field goal, and as a result, Penn State, instead of going into halftime up by 10, goes in only up by 7. And, in a 3-point loss, Notre Dame got 3 points on that possession, and that play was huge. And it really, I think it boils down to, Jarrod, that this Penn State team, for whatever reason, has had a hard time really keeping their foot on an opponent's throat. Boise State, in the Fiesta Bowl New Year's Eve night, they had a chance to put it away in the first half and go up 21-0, but Drew Allar fumbles and Boise State ends up sticking around until the fourth quarter, even against SMU. Obviously, they ended up winning 38-10, were up 38-3 at one point, but they were up 14-0 and for some reason went for it on 4th and 1 at their own 19, and that could have opened the door for SMU to come back, but ultimately SMU couldn't capitalize. But tonight, Penn State really had a chance to put away Notre Dame and did not capitalize, and this time it came back to bite him.
No, and obviously he only has one good arm, wasn't able to haul that in. Then they kicked that field goal, and that, to me, coupled with the touchdown right after the break, where they marched down the field, would change the complexity of the game. And from that point on, it was just a dogfight. And again, it just came down to who was going to make the least amount of mistakes or the biggest mistake, and it was Penn State. And Drew Allar did a great job throwing to literally Tyler Warren, Khalil Dinkins, and the running backs. But at the end of the day, Penn State just didn't do enough to get the win, and it's another coulda, woulda, shoulda for James Franklin and squad. But to get to the semifinal is better than almost every team other than 3 other teams. So I think there's a lot to hold your hat on. Now it's going to be decision time for a lot of guys. Are Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton coming back? Tyler Warren's off to the league. Abdul Carter is off to the league. Who else is going to declare? And what do you do with that receivers room? Because they need all the help they can get to be able to figure out a competent strategy in that room.
Yeah, and they've already gotten some help. Kyron Hudson's coming in from USC. They have Devontae Ross. I think it's a very good group of 5 receiver from Troy. Had 1,000 yards. Along with guys coming back, Harrison Wallace, Amari Evans. We can't say definitively they'll all be back because the spring transfer portal window exists, but at least tentatively, Penn State will have A lot of guys coming back in the receiver position. But yeah, obviously the product has not been good enough, and it hasn't been good enough really for a long time. And it's worth noting that days before this, Saturday, so 5 days before this game, James Franklin went out of his way to say that Penn State's receiving corps had become a strength this season, and kind of criticized the media for not writing enough about that group. Well, he did that earlier after the Illinois game. Penn State had 3 receivers with 100 yards or more in single games before Illinois. After that, 3 months later, no Penn State wide receiver eclipsed 100 yards. And Franklin, again, he praised the receiving corps, and again, it didn't really deliver.
No, it did not, but they were great at blocking, which is not exactly what you want. And they sprung the run game. Tyler Warren was Tyler Warren. Drew Allar, I think, was 9 of 10 throwing to tight ends, and then I think 0 for 5 or something like that after, other than receivers. And it's a shame because the receiver room has been a strength for Penn State historically, but since David Corley, that it has drastically changed at the position coach. But now Penn State, they get to think about this one for a long time. Obviously, a later spring game this year, but it's going to be interesting to see how Penn State recovers from this, because in other years, obviously, like, the season is over, but this one, you got one game away from the national championship game, just one game, and all they came up 3 points short, and now it's the offseason.
Yeah, and we got to talk about the defense because Tom Allen's unit is not clean on this one at all. You go first off with the missed opportunity, creating a turnover late in the first half. That leads to a field goal by Notre Dame with a backup quarterback. Riley Leonard had to depart briefly due to concussion protocol. He ended up coming back and playing the entire second half. And then at the start of the second half, Penn State's defense needed to make a statement right away and get a free and out, or at least not allow Notre Dame to score. But Notre Dame ended up scoring a touchdown and looking pretty good doing it. I think that drive only took 5 plays. And then in the last 5 minutes, Denai Dennis Sutton, he played a great game, I thought, too. Got a big pick. Penn State goes ahead, and one stop might not seal the game, but one stop would have put Penn State on the brink of winning. And instead, they allow a big passing play for a touchdown. Notre Dame ties the game, and then, the rest is history. So there were good things with the defense, with Saki Wheatley having a pick, Dennis Sutton having a pick, Abdul Carter being a freak as usual, even injured. But I don't think the defense as a whole really did its part in winning this football game.
No, in the second half they got out-executed, and Notre Dame wanted it more. And you could tell just when they came out and punched Penn State in the mouth in that first drive. And then from there, the defense kind of played on their heels. They weren't as aggressive. They played a little bit more tentatively. But the biggest thing is Penn State didn't do enough to win the game, and now they get to sit at home and take this long flight back to State College and figure out what went wrong, how to fix it, and where do they go from here.
Yeah, so all is said and done, and we'll have a lot of time to talk about this. But ultimately, Jarrod, do you think this season is a success or a failure? The way I look at it, and this will be my final takeaway, is that it was a success overall. Most wins in program history. First time in the playoff, albeit it's an expanded field, but they won 2 playoff games. I know SMU and Boise State weren't anybody's national title pick or even national title dark horse, but those were still top 10 teams, and Penn State not only beat them, but basically pounded them for the most part. They deserve their flowers for that, and setting a school record for wins with 13 at a place like Penn State. That's a successful season, but the narrative that James Franklin can't win the type of games tonight against your Notre Dames, against your Ohio States, against your Oregons, against these big-time teams, that narrative is not going away. And until that narrative goes away, I feel like the season can be successful, but unsatisfying, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it. I think it is successful. Obviously, you get to the semifinal. Only 3 other teams made it this far, right? 2 teams are done after this week, but there's going to be a team. Now it's well after midnight. A team tonight is going to lose. So another team's season is over, but it still leaves you searching for more. Much like it does after Ohio State, much like it did after Oregon. But for what it's worth, it's a successful season. But at the same time, you're sitting there wishing that it could have been different.
It feels like the season took forever. That West Virginia game, was only about 4 or 5 months ago, but it feels a lot longer than that. But on behalf of Jarrod and myself, we appreciate all the viewers, all the retweets, all the likes, all the comments, even the negative ones. That keeps it fun. So we appreciate all our readers in Nittany Sports Now, and we're not done yet. We got one more game to recap. You can check out my writing, Jarrod's writing on our site, Nittany Sports Now. Follow our Twitter account at NittanySN. Follow my Twitter account at Joe Smeltzer775 and his at JPrugard26. Joe Smeltzer, Jarrod Prugard, Penn State doesn't get it done against Notre Dame, and as a result, the Irish are playing for the national title, and Penn State is thinking about the 2025 season.